Before kicking this off, I just want to state I have a Discord server, the link to which is in the description. I also have a Patreon for those who want to help support the channel. Its link is also in the description, but please don't feel obligated. The big reason I'm bringing this up is to alleviate any possible confusion. You don't have to be a patron to join the server, so feel free to come in and hang out. But with that out of the way, let's get on with the video. Gundam Endless Waltz is a strange animal. Though it technically exists in an alternate continuity of the After Colony era, as witnessed with its Gundam redesigns, it still works, rather well I might add, as a sequel to Gundam Wing. Save for aesthetic changes, which tend to not bother me in any regard, this 3-part OVA follows up the series which preceded it almost perfectly. It addresses a lot of complaints I had with Wing's storytelling, while challenging ideas which felt intentionally flimsy. The concept of total pacifism, that disarmament would lead to world peace, always felt like a dream shared by numerous characters as opposed to a goal in it of itself. It was something to strive for, instead of putting into practice outright. Come the end of Wing, I got the sense Relena and nearly everyone else, when trying to make this dream a reality, feared it was doomed to fail. Within the series itself, during the events pertaining to the Sank Kingdom, Relena saw for herself the core flaw in her ideology, that though her nation more or less disarmed and wanted to be left alone, those with ambition looked to conquer it anyway. She came to understand that her dream was a nearly unobtainable one, that there are some who words alone cannot reach. Yet she tried to make it real, regardless. To me, this seemed less like hypocritical grandstanding and more set up for something to come. Idealism overrode sense, and it was going to be knocked down. Wing has a few other ideas like this, ones that are seemingly weak, yet propped up by the characters. An example of this would be the creation of a one-world government at the end of the series, something which more or less existed at the start and set into motion everything that followed because of how incompetent as well as power-hungry said government was. Though it was an alliance of multiple nations as opposed to one superstate, its role was functionally the same. It governed the people and kept them in line. We saw the first one-world government fail spectacularly. Who's to say Relena's creation wouldn't follow suit? Once more, this felt less like blatant hypocrisy to be ignored, but rather set up for a future event. There were parallels to be followed up on. A lot of sequels to series, especially ones with the runtime of movies, have a tendency to feel a bit contrived and shoehorned. I love Char's counterattack as an ending to Amuro and Char's story, but even I'll admit, the film's central conflict feels a bit out of nowhere, especially if you've seen Zeta. Sure, you can kinda connect the dots, but nothing is really set up to be explored later. This is the big reason I see Endless Waltz as a nearly perfect sequel. Wing left a lot of ideas up in the air, and something was actually done with them. Case in point being the start of the OVA, with the Gundams being launched into the sun for disposal. This very easily represents the core idea behind Relena's true pacifism. By destroying the machines which saved the Earth only a year prior, we see the commitment to disarmament. However, the moment a threat emerges to challenge humanity's new way of life, the ideal of true pacifism is thrown out the window as the Gundam pilots spring into action to retrieve their machines and face those looking to start a war. Now, if this was Seed, where blatantly hypocritical actions were ignored, that would be one thing. However, Wing is better than that. The idea of true pacifism is challenged and then outright rejected as an inescapable truth finally rears its head. There will be those with ambition that exist who will do whatever it takes to obtain power. Your ideals mean nothing to these people. If one is to maintain peace, something far more difficult than achieving it in the first place, then sometimes one must take a stand. The Gundam pilots' realization that they are woefully outnumbered, that help isn't going to arrive, highlights just how flawed Relena's idealistic thinking ultimately is. As they fight, the pilots begin to worry that the people of the world have taken the message of pacifism a bit too much to heart. that they've become cowardly and will accept a new violent regime without any protest. Then, to everyone's surprise, the people of the besieged city, perhaps even the world at large, rise up and declare they will never follow the antagonists even if they emerge victorious, that they'll fight to preserve the way of life they've come to know, even if it means momentarily compromising their ideals. This action, and not that of the Gundam pilots or even Relina, is what truly wins the day. It's ordinary folk who find their voice and take a stand. By doing this, Endless Waltz follows up and amends one of the big ideas present in Wing. We should all strive to create a peaceful world, understand one another, and avoid violence. However, we must all remain vigilant. One day, the big bad wolf may come a-knockin', so we need to be prepared to knock right back. This is something I really appreciate about Endless Waltz. Instead of doubling down, the OVA challenges its own ideas without casting them aside entirely. It does what any good sequel should, at least one of this style. Hell, I even appreciate how Relina's one-world government comes back to bite her in the ass, since that is the very thing which sees her almost led to ruin. If evil Maneva got her to capitulate, the day may have been lost long before the people of the world found the will to rise up. On that note though, I do have a pretty sizable gripe with Endless Waltz. That being evil Maneva herself. Her actual name aside, because come on, we all know what she is, this girl's existence poses far too many questions. For those who don't know, evil Maneva is supposedly the daughter of Treize, which just makes me scratch my head in confusion. You think the man would have brought her up at least once, or mentioned the fact he had a wife or lover. I always got the vibe Treize and Lady Une had the hots for each other. This would have undoubtedly been mentioned if that was, in fact, the case. The girl seems to be coming out of nowhere, which is something I tend to hate in any given sequel. If a new character has a personal relationship with an old one, you think they would have been mentioned in the past, at least in passing. Seems contrived, I'm not a fan. Though I can understand this hiccup stemming from Endless Waltz's own unique continuity. As a character, evil Maneva is fine, frustratingly smug in a good way in fact, but the details of who she is still bother me. Having said that, there is something Mustache Man says at the end which leads me to believe evil Maneva is either a clone or just a brainwashed child who may in fact not be Treize's daughter. If this wound up being the case, I'd actually dig it. It would be a really sly reveal for those paying attention, and completely mitigate my one real issue with Endless Waltz. Well, that and the fact that the music just isn't as good as Wing the series. A little thing. Now there is something else I want to touch on, namely the characters and what the OVA does to flesh them out. As I alluded to on my Wing video, Waltz does go more in depth to explain Operation Meteor. How it played out really was just a giant coincidence. Ordinarily, I wouldn't be a fan of such a reveal, however, the execution kinda sells it. Originally, Operation Meteor was going to be a colony drop, because of course it was, and the Gundams were going to be sent to Earth in its aftermath. They'd take advantage of the chaos following the drop, kill all those that stood in their way, and conquer the world in the name of the colonies. Thankfully, people with a conscience stood in the way of this original plan, resulting in Troa becoming a pilot, Duo stealing a Gundam, and Wu Fei not wanting to become a monster. It's a coincidence, but a heroic one. I understand how it came into being, as opposed to it just being hand-waved away. This also helps give context to the Gundam pilots, explains, albeit very briefly, why they are doing what they are doing. In hindsight, it slightly improves Wing as a series, however, much of its core issues still remain. Wu Fei, for instance. Having the simplest understanding of why he fights throughout the series does his character quite a bit of good. However, the lack of build-up concerning how he changes, his relationship with Treize, works to hurt Endless Waltz. Well, less hurts and more blunts, shall we say. The duel between Hero and Wu Fei, from an animation standpoint, is awesome, even if I don't like the redesign of the Zero and its silly angel wings. I like the rest though. You just really cannot beat 90s Gundam OVA animation. From a story standpoint though, said duel doesn't fare as well, at least as well as it could have. This isn't a fault of Endless Waltz on its own, but rather the fact it's a sequel to Wing. The flaws of the series carry over to the OVA. Simply put, the relationship between Treize and Wu Fei didn't hit nearly as hard as it could have. Same holds true for nearly everything Hero has going on as a character. If all these moments and facets of Wing, the series, landed with the punch it no doubt wanted, then the duel between Hero and Wu Fei wouldn't have just been entertaining, but legendary. Endless Waltz does a great job at setting up the stakes for the pair's battle. But if Wing had done that as well, then it would have given Amuro's duel with Char in CCA a run for its money. Instead of being a good fight in Gundam, it would have been one of the franchise's best. All in all though, the character work done in Endless Waltz is pretty good. It doesn't alleviate every issue from Wing, but it couldn't. Instead, the OVA tries to improve upon what the original series lacked, and does so rather well. For instance, Wing's characters had a tendency to fall flat because, in place of showing the audience how they change, gradually demonstrating what their thought process is, the series tells us outright. Individuals like Relina and Zex eventually start to come off as ideological mouthpieces as opposed to people. When trying to get someone invested into a story, this just doesn't work. It's unnatural and stilted, unengaging. Again though, Endless Waltz improves upon this issue and remedies it outright. People sound like people. This even extends to Relina in Evil Maneva, which is really impressive considering how their conversations are centered around politics. We get the definitive version of Wing's cast in Endless Waltz, because, unlike Wing itself, everyone gets to act more like a character and less like the outline of one. Though moments built up by the previous series don't hit as hard as they could, they still hit. The OVA builds up to everything that plays out on screen. It's satisfying because the payoffs that follow, its storytelling is not just an improvement over Wing, but good in its own right. What makes Endless Waltz a perfect sequel is, oddly enough, its strength being what Wing as a series lacked. The storytelling is great. It builds off what came before and isn't afraid to show things in a new light. It explores characters and ideas, challenges them so that they have proper room to grow, develop. Though there are those who get the short end of the stick, namely Hero, who is still a bit of a mystery, everyone in the cast has their fair shake and a moment to shine. We get to see what these characters may have been like if Wing had a bit more time in the oven. Honestly though, I wasn't expecting this bizarre scene where Hero throws a pineapple into the sea for a pair of dogs to be really relevant for his character. Makes it stick out all that much more because, Jesus. I'll admit, Gundam Wing is flawed, incredibly so. However, I can see what it's trying to do. There's a sincerity to it which gives the series a lot of charm. At the end of the day, it just fumbled its execution. Unfortunately, this just so happens to be the most important step. You mess up here, your entire work will suffer. I think it's a testament to everything else Wing has going on though, which allows it to still be an enjoyable ride despite its failings. Wing may get preachy, but it never felt self-righteous. Perhaps that's why I could tolerate the Gundams exploding and their pilots still surviving, unlike other series. That, or perhaps it's the fact the self-destruct is just really bad at its job. After a while, it starts to get kinda funny. Endless Waltz, however, from where I sit, has no flaws of its own. At least, massive ones. What drags it down is its ties to Wing. If that series was better, then certain moments in the OVA would have landed a lot harder. Yet, at the same time, its ties to the original series is what makes it a legitimately great sequel. It doesn't ignore what came before, but embraces it. So, after doing this deep dive into Wing, I may give Glory of the Losers a try since, from what I've heard, it's a great manga retelling of Wing, similar to Gundam The Origin. It's also the continuity which leads into Endless Waltz, so perhaps I'll give it a read just to see what changes. No guarantee on a video, but you never know. Unlike a lot of other alternate universes, After Colony has grabbed and kept my attention. Though I can admit 00 is a better series, I gotta say, I think I like Wing more. Weird spot to be in, but it happens. There's just something about it. But with that said, I've been Boofar191. Tell me what you thought in the comments down below. I didn't mean to lie at the end of my Wing video. This was meant to come out only a few days after it, but then life kicked me in the nads again. Or rather the stomach. I ended up getting the stomach flu, so if I sound weird, that's why. I'm still fighting it off. I'm not gonna go into details. But yeah, Wing has been fun. I don't know what I'm gonna do next. I'll figure it out. I usually do. So yeah, tell me what you thought one more time. I've been Boo. See you all next time. Goodbye.